We're back. This episode, we have the starting pitchers to go over. I'm really excited to do this one. There's a lot of talent, and I just recorded one, but I rambled for too long, so we're going to do the whole thing again. I don't mind. I'm having a lot of fun. And so this episode, we're going to go a bit quicker because I want to start making these about 15 minutes. So number 20, Jack Salinger. Jack Salinger sneaks his way onto this list because he has such a nasty profile for a lefty. I have him as the number 6 lefty in baseball. The dude has 4 really good pitches, really high stuff control. The movement is a little bit low. He gets away with it with how top-notch everything else is. And he's gotten a little lucky this year, only letting up probably 1.1 home run per 9. I could totally see that inflating to 1.5 with that lower movement rating. But how good those 4 pitches are, I think it's just he's such a nasty profile for a lefty that he should have a couple huge years in Colorado. And he has so much team control left, one of the more valuable arms in baseball because of a couple of those reasons. Next up is his teammate, one spot higher, just because of such higher movement. I think I had to put Susac, even pretty much the same stuff control type and same 4-pitch arsenal. He's not a lefty, but he's a ground ball guy, and his movement's 20 points higher. As you can see here, he's let up the same home runs this year, but I think over time that Susac should probably allow a little bit less than Salinger. Both really nasty. It doesn't really matter which order you put them in. You could value the lefty arm higher. You could value the higher movement out of Susac, but they're both really nice combinations of strikeouts, walks, limiting guys. Should be really nice to have. Has a 2-headed monster about the same age there in Colorado over the next few years with a lot of team control left. Michael Baird has been one of the cooler stories in TLG history. I think I'm going to make an episode on that, like some of the best signings and free agent gets in TLG history. And he's one of those guys that's just been so consistent over the years because his high control. He has had 3 really good seasons in his career. The last 4 still pretty solid last year, but not quite as good as those other 3. The guy has such a nice 3-pitch arsenal with such nice control and solid movement, which really helps in that ballpark. Only walks 4% of guys, so he sneaks his way onto this list at number 18, I guess. Next up, we have Blake Snell, another lefty. I have him as the 5th best lefty in baseball. He probably thought going into this list, I'd probably end up putting him in a lot higher, but just seeing how talented those top 15 guys were, I couldn't really get him much higher, but you can't have him really much lower either with how good of a lefty arm he has. Such good 4 pitches, such a good curveball, 98 miles an hour lefty that just fireballs it. Only walks about 8% of guys. 8% of guys a couple years. He was inflated up to about 10% in St. Louis this year, but it's usually a little bit better than that. The guy's had some monster seasons too. He had a really close to a Cy Young season in 2025, 232 innings pitched, had a 1.1 whip, so just brought so much value to the Dodgers that season. 4.2 WAR the season before. It's just been a really, really, really tough to play against when you have a lefty with that combination of tools. Right above him is another lefty. I actually gave the nod to Groome to put him one spot higher than Snell, just because Groome has come into his own so much. He's got an 80 curveball, and he's just got such an amazing stuff. I think we lost a little bit of stuff out of Snell as he's gotten older. He was at 65, and he's gotten a little bit more control as he's gotten older, but it's just not quite as electric. I really like the electricity out of Groome's arm. I thought that was a really fun battle to kind of go back and forth in my head to see who I wanted to rank higher. I gave the nod to Groome, though. I think he's going to have a couple huge seasons coming up here. It's only at a 1.1 whip in Boston there. He might be their top pitcher in the next few seasons now that some of those other guys are starting to age a little bit. We'll see. But yeah, 28-year-old lefty with 65 stuff. 26% K rate. It's just so cool. I love that dude. I think he shut me down for 5 straight innings in the World Series last year, and 2 games maybe even. It was just, he's so tough to play against when you have lefties in your lineup. He just shuts them down like crazy. Next up, we have Oscar Soto. There's so many Sotos in this league. Yeah, Soto is one of the best young arms in baseball. He's the youngest player on this list, I think, at 22 years old. He's got 65, 70 stuff. He's striking out 27% of guys. He's limiting batters to hitting 197 against them. And last year in high A, he was letting up 218, so it just shows he jumped like 3 levels. And he's just so good. It's amazing. So having Chicago with him and Massey both on this list, you'll see in a bit, that 2-headed monster plus you get kind of a third head monster with Jared Jones. But these two guys are just unbelievable. The movement's a bit lower, but he makes up for it with the increase in stuff. 4 pitches, just has everything you need. Only weakness of his game is he lets quite a bit of base runners, but when you're striking out that many, not many guys are getting on base. It's not the end of the world. He's only let up 6 hits per 9. Just an amazing talent. Could have some Cy Youngs in his future, especially in the AL. There was not a lot of great starting pitchers. Most of the top guys here in the NL. As you see, Matt Manning here on this list, he's a guy that came over the NL this year in a big trade at the deadline. Arizona's tooling up to try to win a title with Mike Trout in the twilight years at 35 years old. Matt Manning is a guy that led the AL in pitcher war 2 years ago and was really good last year, has been really solid this year. He is letting up about 10 hits per 9 this season in Arizona, which is a bit high. He was down to 8 the last couple seasons, so it's almost 2 hits per 9 innings each game, but his walk rate's gotten a lot better. His walk rate's down to 5%. It's just been, which is probably mostly Hedges. Hedges really helps that walk rate with guys, as we'll talk about in the later episodes of the catcher rankings. He's been so good and really could be a big add when it comes to postseason time if Arizona can hold on there. They've had a little bit of a rough last month or so, getting passed up by the Giants, but still should be a wild card team there, so it'll be interesting to see how he does. Next up, we have Teng. Kai-Wei Teng is, I don't know how to say that name at all, could argue he could be a little bit higher on this list based on this season alone. He's been one of the best pitchers in baseball. He actually leads I think he leads the entire league in pitcher war. He leads the NL, and I'm pretty sure it's higher than anyone in the AL. It's pretty close, though. But the guy's just had an unbelievable season. I figure his stats are maybe a bit nerfed because of how good that as a pitcher park San Francisco is. It really limits the home runs. As you can see, he only has 50 movement. He's a fly ball guy, but he's only let up 0.6 per 9. But he still is really good with the K and walk rates. 23% K rate's really solid, and only a 4% walk rate. It's amazing. Limiting batters to hitting 220 against him. And he doesn't let up too many other things at all. Hits, walks, home runs. Just been an amazing start of the season. He's had an awesome season. Might even win the Cy Young. So probably could have him as high as number 10 on this list or so, but there's some real good dudes above him here, so that's why he kind of fell a few more spots than I thought he might based on this season. Cal Quantrill is so good. He's so good at everything. He has 5 pitches. He's a fan favorite. Really good mentals. Every single season he has a low FIP. 3.08 last year, 3.6 this year. Guys hit about 220, 240 off him, and it's just been so many good seasons here of like 3 WAR, high 2s or whatever. So he's 31 years old now, and he's just been chugging away with Boston there. A couple World Series rings, and just been so consistent for so many years, and always solid. Doesn't get blown up too very often, and it's been really clutch of the postseason for a few of those really good Boston postseason runs they've had. So he deserves a spot up in the top 15 of this list. Next up, we have Adrian Morejon. Adrian Morejon is the 3rd best lefty on this list. Adrian Morejon, I have as 27 years old. He's in the middle of his prime, and he's only walking 6% of guys, and he's striking out almost 30%, which is crazy high for a lefty. It's like Groome, but Jacob Groome, but even better control. He's just been so good. Just 99-mile-an-hour fastball with that 75 changeup and 75 curve. Just that'd be so hard to hit against. He's won so many games for the Reds here in this last little while too, as you can see. Just such an amazing player. I would love to have him on my ball team. Just one of my favorite players there. It's been so cool how he's been a lifelong Red too. We'll see how much longer they hold on to him. Luis Patino is next up on this list. He's can't really be any lower just based on the fact he's pretty much the best in the league at arguably the most important thing, which is not allowing home runs. In baseball, this is pretty much all home runs, the highest home run rates there's ever been in the history of the game, and he's playing as a guy in the middle of his prime with 80 movement. That's just so valuable, the fact that he can just keep balls in the park. It doesn't even matter that his walk rate's pretty much the highest on this list of the top 20 guys. Almost everybody's between like 4 and 9%. He's all the way up to 11.7, but it just doesn't matter because the difference between like an 8 and like an 11 really only is like a walk every couple games, because that's only like 3 out of 100 batters. You only face like 20. It's really like maybe a walk every couple games. That means so much less than letting out like half the amount of home runs. So most guys let like a home run every start, where he's at 0.3 per 9. So just the value he brings with that, keeping the ball in the ballpark at 100 miles an hour with 4 pitches, It's just incredible. And so he's just so consistent. He's just never going to have a season where he lets up like 30 home runs. He's just always going to be keeping that home run rate low. And the highest you'll ever see it is like 1.1. That's like his worst season with a 4.5 FIP. But every other year, he's just so good. Like 5.6 WAR, 4.7, 5.7. It's going to be over 4 this year. It's just amazing. Amazing how he can move that ball so well and keep that ball in the park. So he had to be up here pretty high. Kumar Rocker is another guy who's a young, fiery talent. He's got such an electric arm. He's got that 97-mile-per-hour fastball. He's got that massive slider. It's probably the 3 best pitch combination in the league. I don't think anyone else has a combination of 375s. Morejon was pretty dang close, but I think Rocker has the best one. He doesn't have the 4th pitch, but those 3 are so unbelievable. This guy would be so fun to watch if he was at this level in real life. Hopefully he can get to one day in real life. This is like the peak Rocker, one of the best versions you'll see, just because he strikes out so many guys. He's at 27% strikeout. He should win the AL Cy Young this year, I think maybe. He's last time I checked, he was leading the league in AL pitcher WAR. The guy also has that crazy movement rating, and his control is looks even better than that 50 at only 7% walk rate. It's not too bad at all, almost 8. But yeah, what a cool pitcher. Really worthy of that first overall pick that they made him a few years ago. Next up, we have Sale, who's the number 2 lefty on this list. Sale is the ageless wonder. He's starting to lose a little bit of velocity and stuff. He's gone down from like high 60s. Just finally fell to 60 there, but he's kept going up in in control, and he's kept that really good control rate. He's actually walking maybe the career best, 4.5. Yeah, it is. That's just unbelievable. His age 37 season, he's walked the career best control. So he's really changed as a pitcher, gone from a real explosive, like probably the best strikeout guy in the league. He's probably be like an 80 stuff guy back in the old out of the parks with the 38% strikeout rates back in the day. It's just ridiculous. Still has that awesome stuff. Still 24% is just unbelievable, but it's got even more control. So it's just amazing to see how he's aged. One of the coolest stories of TLG so far. I think a lot of people would have expected, probably with that profile too, if you would have polled everybody in the league in like 2012, they'd say he probably wouldn't age very well at all. He's like 170 pounds, total sidearm, just like kills that elbow with the torque he has on that slider. But funny enough, he's actually aged better than pretty much anybody in baseball. Just been so good. Noah Syndergaard is actually one spot higher, the Boston teammate. He's really similar to Sale. The ratings are almost the same. I think Sale has 60 stuff and 70 control and like 50 movement. Syndergaard's got that 60 movement, which is just quite a bit better. Lets up even less home runs. I just had to have him up here because one thing stood out to me, and that's a 1.7% batted ball base on ball percentage there. That's just so crazy to me. The fact that he just doesn't walk anyone that's at 34 years old with that kind of 100-mile-an-hour fastball and that kind of intimidation as a 6'6" pitcher with that crazy real-life slider he has. It's kind of regressed in the game a little bit, so he's turned into more of a finesse guy. It still lists him as a power pitcher based on he is a power pitcher, 100-mile-an-hour ground ball guy, but funny enough, he's that good. He's pretty much like a finesse guy at this point with such a crazy control profile. It's just so crazy how good has Boston's already had 3 guys on this list. I think it's actually, yeah. So it's just those guys in Boston are so good. It's really exciting to see. I think next up on this list we have Mike Soroka. Mike Soroka is another guy that's way up here. He's probably even, I was going to put him a few spots lower, and then the more I looked at him, I'm like, I just can't have this guy any lower than right around number 9, just because how good the movement and control are. The guy only lets up 4.7% batted ball rate. It's at 3% some years, and how low the home runs are. That's the main thing. It's like 70 movement. He's actually at even better, probably the best anti-home run guy in the league, even better than Patino. If you look, he's just led the league in that like multiple seasons in TLG, like 0.1 in 13 starts, 0.6, 0.7, 0.6. Like the guy, It just doesn't get any better than that. Like, if you play against that guy, you're just not going to be able to hit bombs off him. And he's also not walking very many guys. So the only way you're going to score against that guy is if you get like 3 base hits in 1 inning. And that's just to score like 1 or 2 runs. You're just not going to get those huge like 5-run innings off him just because he's never going to let up that like 3-run bomb. So he just keeps his team in every single game he's in. It's just always so good. The fragile tag and the low amount of innings gave me a little bit of pause to whether he should be this high, but it just doesn't matter. Like, he's still 218 innings in 24 and got injured a little bit last year, like a half season there, but still back to 200 innings this year. So just can't be any lower. He's that good. He's so solid. Next up, you have another NL East pitcher. This NL East is just beyond loaded with pitching. So nasty, and these are the 2 highest here. Esqueda is actually the highest lefty on this list. Esqueda is so crazy. He's like the modern day Maddox, where a lot like Soroka, very similar games. Esqueda has even less velocity. He's only 89 and 91, but he's one of the coolest pitchers in the league. His whip, look at his whip, 0.87. He only walks 3.8% of guys, and he's striking out over 20. That combination is just so nuts. It's like 4-1 K to BB. He's got a 240 batting average against. 200 guys hit off him and only 240 they get on base there against him at percentages. It's just everything about this guy. Sub 3 FIP, was been under 3.2 each of the last 2 seasons too. Just turned into the best lefty in baseball. I actually put him above Sale just because I think Esqueda is coming into such a peak prime where Sale's losing a little bit of stuff. I think Esqueda is probably just like an inch better than Sale at this point, even though it's really close. They're both just so good at splitting hairs, but I think Esqueda has probably got the titles. Him and Morejon will be like the best lefties in baseball the next few seasons, both in the NL. So it'd be quite a battle. I think there's going to be such a battle for those NL Cy Youngs every year. There's just so many good arms. It's going to be really fun, especially to see a couple of those young guys. So next up, we have JP Massey. Speaking of young guys, JP Massey is really high on this list. Probably a bit higher than I thought he'd be before I started it. But the more you look at him, he has to be up here because of a recent progression too in his control. I'd expect him to get that BB rates pretty high, about as high as anyone on this list, but I think it'll drop right to about 7 or 8 or maybe low 9% next year, just based on that last progression. If he actually does have that 55-60 stuff, it's just been that changeup. It's just been so good. He's an over-the-top guy with such a nasty screwball, which is interesting. 80 changeup, 4 really good pitches. I think if he was to go up to a 65 fastball, maybe a 70, he would probably turn into the best player in baseball. I think as it is, he's probably going to be in that 5 to 10 range. That's the only thing he's missing is that number 1 insane fastball. Still really solid, but to put him up to that top tier, as you'll see with these guys above him, that's the only thing. I think he really has a chance to be the best pitcher in baseball, though. A couple of these guys above him are quite a bit older than him by about 4 years minimum, almost everybody. So I think this guy, definitely him and Esqueda and Kumar Rocker and those guys that really have a chance to be the future top 5. Those guys are all just so nasty, and I think Massey's actually the best of the bunch when it comes to the young guy, just because his profile. It's really cool because he had that 35 stuff, and now it's up to 55. So really cool. So next up is Abreu. Abreu has lost a little bit of stuff. I actually thought going in he might be number 1, but I kind of hadn't realized he did lose a decent amount of stuff this season, so hopefully he's not starting to regress. He's so good that even with a bit of regression, he's still up there in the top 10 for sure. But you do notice the K rate has fallen from 35 the last 2 seasons to 30, so maybe it is kind of a little bit legit, but it doesn't really matter. The guy is still just so electric and puts up so many crazy appearances. As you can see, he's won his last 5. He's dropped his FIP all the way to 3.6. He's still striking out 30%, which only about 3 pitchers in baseball get over 30% as a starting pitcher. Guys only hit such low batting averages often. It's nuts. If you look at his stats, 200, 190, 210. It's just amazing how well he's produced. He's 30 years old, extreme ground ball in Pittsburgh, and surprised the home runs even as high as it is. With that profile, I thought the home runs, like last year's at 0.5. So surprised even at 1.1. It's just, he's probably better than that. He's probably a lot better than the stats have indicated this season. He is just so nasty. I hope he can hold on and that regression doesn't keep coming, but it could just be my scout. Next up, we have Jack Flaherty, his teammate. I actually put him 1 spot higher than Abreu. Again, it's kind of splitting hairs. I just really like Abreu's consistency. He has such good stuff and control, such good fastball changeup combination, 4 such high-level pitches, and he's just done it for so long, which is what I like most about him. He actually started TLG back in the day in 2020, leading the league with 8 WAR, and he's had so many seasons of 4 or better WAR, pretty much like every season. He's just been model of consistency for such a long period of time. It's on such a reasonable contract too. He's probably worth about $35 to $38 million a year at least, with how nasty he is, and he only makes about half that. So it's just been one of the best players in baseball for quite a while now, and we're really into the nitty gritty in these top guys here. So Kyle Wright is number 3 on this list, 1 spot ahead of Flaherty, just because of how good he's been in Coors. It's so hard to pitch there, and he's put up such amazing stats in Coors Field. He had 8.2 WAR, Cy Young type season in 23, 24. He had 5 WAR, 5 WAR, 4 WAR, 5.8. Like it's every year since 2021 has just been utterly dominant, and he definitely deserves a spot in the top 3 as one of the elite players in baseball. Pearson is number 2. Nate Pearson has such unbelievable stuff. He's like actually just fell to 75. He's been 80 stuff guy. He strikes out over 30% of guys almost every single season. 35% of guys last year. That's just unfair. In only 8 games, but he had that big injury last year. But yeah, it's 32%. He's just a cheat code when it comes to strikeouts. He's going to mow down half your lineup every game. So you just got to hope that you get a couple lucky big hits against him, or else you're probably going to lose almost every game. He's just so consistently dominant. Once you have a guy like that trotting out every 5 days, you're just going to be a really good ball club every year because he's so good. And number 1 spot above, I think he deserved the number 1 spot just of how unbelievable he's been every single season. Even like a season like this where he gets that low movement starts to hurt him a little bit, and he's up to that 1.4 home runs per 9, which is quite a bit higher than everyone else in this top 10 list. He just makes up for it with such a low amount of walks at 2.5. It's just so ridiculous. That control makes him such a weapon. And every single game, he's got the craziest ratios of strikeouts to walks. I think the craziest thing, if you look at the pitching list here and the pitching leaders in the league, if you go to the NL, you see the strikeout to walk ratio. Look at this. That's just jumps off the page at you. 11.3 to 1 is nuts. That's literally over double anyone else in baseball. So the guy I thought deserved to be number 1, even though you could make an argument. A couple of those other guys could also be number 1, Flaherty, Pearson, and Kyle Wright. I just like Bieber, the 5 pitches, the elite control, the electric stuff, 28% strikeout rate every single season, sitting around 26, 27%. His whip is so low every year, and just doesn't let up too much when it comes to hits or walks. So the guy's just is again splitting hairs, but I thought I had a pretty good argument for number 1 just because of how cool that strikeout to a walk rate. It's just so many things about his game, and he's also probably the healthiest guy. He hasn't had any seasons with injuries. This is his innings by years in TLG the last like 6 years. So 189 so far. He should be over 200 with 1 more start or 2 more starts, I guess. 200, 227, 235. This is a combined year with the 235, 225, and 200, 200. So I think that's another reason probably why I'd say he deserves number 1, just because he's an absolute menace when it comes to eating innings. Just in the entire TLG, he just comes out there in every game. He's actually in a real cold streak lately, which brought down stats a bit. But he was even more dominant early on. Like you just see he had the 9 inning, 2 hit, 0 runs, 1 walk against Chicago Cubs, one of the best pitching performances against the year. So the guy is a top 10 player in baseball, and he's just so good. So that's it for our list. Doing this list just makes me want to go out and draft and sign pitchers. You just see all this talent, and it's hard not to get jealous, especially at Pittsburgh. I think you can make an argument that's maybe the best rotation of all time. It's even better than because Asa Lacy is right about the edge of this list too. I think Lacy, you can make an argument, probably even better than Salinger. Probably in hindsight, probably would actually put him on Salinger. I don't know why I didn't, but so you could argue that they have 5 guys on this list, I think, which is nuts. They're so deep. I think it's probably better than that mid-90s rotation from the Braves, just because of how nasty. I think Bieber and Abreu and Flaherty are just as good as those top 3. So it's really cool to see what Pittsburgh and Alex have done in this dynasty and put those together. And Boston really isn't far behind. I think Boston has 3 or 4 guys in this list too. With you get Gallen's not even on here. He's pretty close to the number 20 spot. But you get like Syndergaard, Sale, Quantrill, and Jay Groome on this list. So yeah, you have 4 guys in the top 16, which is crazy. So Boston and Pittsburgh totally makes sense why those guys are so good every year in the playoffs every single season. The last few seasons, those rotations just make them so good. So, anyways, that's it for this episode. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking about those top pitchers, and I'm sure there's a lot of disagreements, especially with guys I might have missed. I know I probably missed Asa Lacy there at the end of that list. I'm sure there's probably a couple others I didn't think of. So let me know. But cheers. That'll be it for this episode.